Let me share my screen just briefly. So here's our agenda. Um, and the first item is the review of the minutes. I noticed there was an amendment to them. Does anybody else have any comments on the minutes?
I do.
Yes?
Yeah, first of all, I sent out the minutes quite a while ago and asked for any revisions to the minutes. It was a week later, and I know that I asked for them by February 3rd, so I sent them out a week before that. I did receive some comments from Carol, and I did go through those, and I did reply to Carol that I was reviewing what she said, and I was going to make revisions per going back to the minutes, and would make the revisions when appropriate. I did say that there seemed to be some instances where people had made statements, and I wanted to be true to the statements that they had made. So I sent out the minutes with the agenda before the meeting, and today, an open meeting law violation, Carol responded because I did not make revisions to something that she had already suggested, which I did not receive any responses from anybody else except for Suzanne, which I received today via private email to myself, but I had not received anything else from anybody else. But I did not make the suggested revision that Carol had made earlier. Now, she knows, I mean, we've all been told over and over again that you can't have an open debate in emails. It's in violation of open meeting law, and David responded that it was a violation, that he agreed with Carol, but his statement was as I wrote it in the minutes. And if he had had an issue with that, then he should have gotten back to me himself personally between David and myself, not including the entire committee. And, frankly, this has been, these violations of open meeting law have been happening over and over and over again.
Okay,
I'm
so let's talk.
So
Let's get more, Lily, hold on. Let's
So-
get more specific.
So I
When
will,
somebody replies with a comment on the minutes, the appropriate thing is to just reply to you,
that's correct.
not to reply to all. It's
Correct.
too general to say. So we will have to do that. Reply all isn't valid.
I apologize.
Except for discussion, possible agenda content, which you can have a discussion on.
We could
But
just have information that's given to everybody,
Yeah.
but we need to be in a meeting to have a deliberation. So what I will, in the spirit of what was said, because David expressed that he had an issue with this, I propose to delete the words, take a more aggressive approach and out of the minutes, which I think satisfies the what was the intent of the open meeting law violations today. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes with that revision.
Okay, I'll second it. Is there any discussion? Carol, do you want to say anything?
That sounds fine.
David? No. Okay. So everyone should remember, you can't do a reply all. You can only reply. Replying is perfectly okay because you can have two-party deliberations unless you're on a three-man board. As long as there's less than a quorum, you can have a serial discussion, but the safest thing to do is just have two-way discussions, okay? So whenever you send anything out for comment, remember, you should only get a reply. People should only reply to the person who sent it out. Okay. So
Dick,
Yes, John?
in the case of minutes, wouldn't it
Yes.
just be easier to, when the minutes are proposed at the next meeting or then the meeting they come up, that the adjustments to the minutes be made then at that meeting?
No, it's easy to fix it so that we can get it done quickly. Because these
Okay.
are usually not very serious changes. So the minutes you sent out last incorporate the changes, right, Lily?
No, except for that one change, which, so they incorporate any other changes that anybody else has gotten back to me with, which, the spirit of which, Carol and then Suzanne did get back to me, so.
Okay. So Carol, are you happy with the minutes as
Yes.
yes. And David, are you happy? Is everybody else happy? Do we have to do a roll call vote? Carol, John, well, let's
Yes.
see.
I,
Yeah. GB and David.
Yes.
Okay, Chuck's not here, so we need one alternate. Who else is not here? I guess that's it, right?
This is GB. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now we
Okay,
can.
okay, I was on the wrong microphone, so I'm okay with that.
Okay,
And I would like to say yes, vote as a yes as well.
I forgot you, Willie. Okay, you made the motion.
Hey, Dick,
Oh, yeah.
you need to read the preamble for the.
No, I don't. It's not part of the law. It's
It
just a practice.
every other meeting I.
And
go-
I know that. And I wrote that preamble. And I keep laughing because I put in my own wording and everyone repeats it point blank. So I'm not going to repeat it because it's not part of the law. We all know, but it is important, and we've gone over it, that we have to take roll call votes on everything, including adjournment. And we just did on the minutes.
And Dick, also at 4:15, Alex from EF Winslow will be
Yes.
joining. Okay.
Yes, that's right. That's a modification to the agenda. It's on the agenda, but out of order. We're going to talk about,
Air source heat pumps, right?
yes, he's going to give us a tutorial on air source heat pumps. And Alex just entered the waiting room. So welcome, Alex. And with that, let me stop sharing my screen. And Alex should be joining us right now. While he's doing that, Lily, will you introduce him?
At the last meeting, we discussed air source heat pumps and how transition to electric heating may be the wave of the future. And we discussed that we know most of us are familiar with ductless mini splits, but we could use a little bit of a refresher. If we had any questions, we could ask. But we don't, I don't, and a lot of the other people on the committee said that they don't really fully understand air source heat pumps that are tied into ductwork, which may have a bigger uptake in the community overall. So I was tasked, or I accepted the responsibility to reach out, and David helped with some names, and Dick helped with some names, and EF Winslow was kind enough to, to call me back and said that Alex from EF Winslow had great information and knowledge. And I don't know your last name, Alex?
Mick Williams.
Okay, but thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So did you have any specific questions, or did you just want me to kind of give you an overview of
Yes.
how
An
these
overview
work?
would be nice, with not omitting altogether on how to take advantage of existing ductwork and if that's viable.
Sure. Well, And you mentioned, I'm sorry, I only caught, it took me a minute to unmute the system. So you guys are familiar with mini split heat pumps?
Some more than others. We should
Okay.
go over that too.
Well, I mean, I guess the first thing is just a, basic explanation of, a heat pump basically is nothing more and I imagine when we're talking heat pumps, we're talking about air to air as opposed to water source or that type. Is that correct?
Yes,
For the most part, yes.
I mean, they all are viable options, but, to try not to make it, keep it into a kind of a simple, maybe handle one part at a time. Most people, when they speak about heat pumps, are talking about what we call air-to-air heat pumps, where you have a condenser outside in the ambient air, and you have some type of inside heating unit. Basically, what you have is an air conditioning system where it reverses the components. The process is basically the same for heating as it is for cooling. In the summer, you're absorbing heat from indoor air and discharging it outside. In the winter, basically you have a device called a reversing valve that reverses the flow of refrigerant so that the device outside is absorbing heat and the inside is discharging it. Because refrigerant boils and evaporates at a much lower temperature than water or other mediums, that's why they use refrigerant, where in even 0-degree air, it's a high temperature to refrigerant and it will boil. And they use that change of states and pressures in order to manipulate the system so it evaporates in the outside and absorbs heat in the changing of states from a liquid to a gas and from a gas to a liquid, and then gives up its heat when it's taken from a gas back to a liquid. Works the same in mini splits as it does in central ducted systems. The biggest difference is that frankly, mini split technology right now is a little bit of ahead of central ducting technology. They get higher efficiencies in mini splits than they do with central systems. The problem is you have many homes that have duct systems and they have outlets for heating to bathrooms, kitchens, hallways, and you really can't do the same job with one or two mini splits. You'll have rooms that are too cold, you'll have rooms that are warm. So if you have an existing duct system, you want to be able to take advantage of the distribution system. The other positive about using central ducted besides distribution is most even mini splits usually are not capable of heating a home down to low temperatures by themselves. As the outdoor temperature drops, both the efficiency and the capacity of a heat pump reduces. There's less heat in the outdoor air, so thus they can't absorb as much heat. And it uses more energy in order to absorb it. So in a lot of homes, what we do is we have a dual fuel system. So using either, and you can do it, most people don't do it much with natural gas, but with propane and oil, which traditionally are more expensive fuels, they use the fossil fuels at low temperatures and they use the heat pump at high temperatures. And you'll typically pick what's called a balance point where it will switch from one fuel to the other. So that way you reduce the amount of fossil fuels that you're using, but you take advantage of the higher efficiency of those fuels when it's low temperatures, rather than using a lot of electricity which your other option is electric backup. But that, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. Are you guys with me so far, or do you have any questions on anything that I've spoken about?
Carol, you're on mute.
I installed heat pumps for air conditioning and only belatedly have realized that I really can use them for heat. So I've been trying to do that this year. I have
Did you go over here and log off?
an oil side when I would be better off using oil.
X on top actually does not.
You cut out a little bit there. Did you ask at what point would you be better off using oil? You're freezing.
Then when you reconnect. Well, did you sign out for the computer?
Hey, Alex?
Yes.
This is David Mead Fox. Can you clarify the difference between a regular heat pump and a so-called cold climate heat pump?
Well, I mean, a cold climate heat pump is a term that's been applied more recently. And
Right.
it typically applies to more like a mini split than anything else. And with some of the products like Mitsubishi and others, they have what they call a hyperheat unit. And what that is, it's a unit that is capable of absorbing large quantities of heat, even at low temperatures. What they don't advertise, though, is that when the efficiency goes down, they also use large quantities, when the temperature goes down, they use large quantities of electricity to get that heat. But, many times you'll have especially if it's new construction, you don't want to put in two systems. You don't want to put in a heat pump system and then some other backup. So by using a so-called cold climate heat pump, you can heat the area with that one product because it will still heat. It's a little bit confusing because they don't advertise the fact that, when they get down into 5, like a Mitsubishi, which is a wonderful product, but they ramp the unit up, they overclock it in order to get that heat. And when it does that, your efficiency is probably only about 40 or 50% higher than straight electric heat. So it's still a little more efficient, but not a lot.
Alex, could you please just put some numbers around that threshold where it switches?
Well, it will vary according to every home's, so there's a number of factors that are involved. So typically, like if I'm figuring a job like your house, first I would do a manual J heat loss of your home. So I'd find out at what BTUs at 0 your house requires. And then I can chart on a scale at what point the output of a heat pump matches the heat loss of the house. Okay, so it varies from home to home depending on the size of the heat pump you're using and the heat loss. Other factors involved are, we also want to calculate what fuel you're using and what the cost of the fuel you're using as a supplement. Okay, so again, there's no set point. I can't come to your house and just stand there and say, well, at 20 you want to use propane, or at 19 you want to use oil. There's so many factors: the cost of the fuel, the cost of the electricity, and the output of the heat pump. So obviously,
I guess a question I have, and maybe you can answer, maybe not. Given our climate here on the Cape, and the temperature, the moderate temperatures that we tend to have compared to, say, mainland, do you know like what percentage of our energy can be come from the air-to-air heat pump as opposed to typically? I'm just trying to get a feeling for how much it can support in our particular environment.
well, I understand your question. As I said, though, it varies from home to home. Generally, I don't, like, let's say you were to put in mini splits, just to pick one thing. And you have 8 or 9 room home and you have, 3 mini splits, I would probably tell you not to run the mini splits much below 20 degrees. Partly because you wouldn't want to, let's say you had hot water heat as a supplement. You wouldn't want to risk freezing of the pipes at the low temperatures. You wouldn't want to have ice cold bathrooms because there's no heat in the bathrooms. So, I mean, some of it's a, kind of a practical decision, not so much mathematical calculation of what is more efficient. I mean, no one wants to walk into a bathroom that doesn't have heat when it's 12 degrees outside. So, we can't just, there's no cut and dry rule. It's up to individuals to some degree.
So Alex, the other variable that I have experienced myself directly is the extent of how tight a home is and how well insulated it is. So I've got one building that has non-ducted air source HVAC, and it's perfectly warm as I want it to be all the time, even when it's very cold, but it's very, very tightly insulated. It's new construction.
Sure.
Secondly, I have a ducted air source HVAC system, and part of my house is very old, still quite well insulated. Same issue, zero problems, no matter how cold it's gotten, only using the air source technologies. So I hear what you're saying, and maybe it would be different if you had a really poorly insulated house, but how much is that?
Well, so on the system that's ducted, what is the supplemental heat?
There is no supplemental heat.
So you're sure that there's no electric supplement in the air handler?
I'm very
Because
sure. Yeah.
99% of the time, when we do a ducted system, we put in what's, an electric heat section. It's part of the air handler.
Well,
itself.
maybe it's there and I don't know it, but it's a very
So
small.
a couple of things happen with those units is one, when they go on defrost, because one of the things that happens with heat pumps is especially in the 40s and mid 30s, moisture outside condenses on the coil because the coil's cold and ice builds up. And so eventually they have to melt the ice. In order to melt the ice, the cycle actually reverses, and it actually will produce air conditioning inside. And what happens is that electric heat section that's in the heat pump will actually run to mask the defrost cycle. The other thing it does is it also will kick in, usually by use of a 2-stage thermostat. So if the heat pump can't keep up, the electric heat actually kicks in automatically to supplement. And, some people aren't aware that they have this. So I don't know, without actually physically looking at your system, I can't say that you don't have it.
Yeah, okay.
But Alex, even if you do have an electric system built in, it's still all electric, right? Without carbon fuels. And if it runs for 20 minutes every other week or so, you're still running on electricity. The defrost cycle doesn't run for that long, does it?
The defrost cycle actually can defrost depends on the weather outside again and the humidity outside. It can run multiple times a day, especially at night when it's extremely cold. And will run for minutes, but it isn't just in defrost. So ducted units are, with the exception, so Mitsubishi and others make ducted heat pumps as well. So you can take some of these higher efficiency Mitsubishis and duct them. Not everybody has that. They do a better job of heating as a sole source than traditionally a lot of the American manufacturers, Amana, Bryant, and others. Their heat pump technology is not as efficient, and they actually have a much larger drop off at low temperatures. So those type of systems have to have some type of supplement. They cannot, you can supplement them with a wood stove, you can supplement them with, other things. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a fossil fuel. Well, I guess wood technically, I don't know, is that renewable resource?
No,
I don't know how that's considered, but, all right, the paper bags we get from the supermarket. But, you know, those units won't, at this point, at this stage of the game, won't heat a typical home by themselves. Now, of course, as these houses get tighter and more efficient and heavier insulated, you know, their heat losses go down, and thus a heat pump can, you know, handle the load much lower.
Mhm.
Can I have a question, Dick? Can I ask a question?
Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, I have a split air pump unit, Mr. Bussey. My question is, and I have a wood stove. I turn it off when the wood stove is running. Should I just leave it on all the time and just set the temperature down? Or should I turn it on and off as
When
I'm?
you say turn it on and off, you mean with the remote? Or
Yes,
yeah,
with the remote.
Well, so the way I would, when I, you know, sometimes I, you know, come to a home with someone like you, and I suggest using the wood smartly. In other words, the same way I was just describing, when it's milder out, you know, when it's November, December, maybe, you know, right up until about Christmas, maybe a little bit later, depending on the weather, use the heat pump. When you get these, like, what was it, 2 weeks ago, was it down to 10 or something?
Right.
You know, when we get these extreme cold snaps, you know, that heat pump is not very efficient. It's using way more electricity. And as you know, currently we're producing electricity with, you know, what, 45% efficient natural gas up in, and then delivering it from Sagamore all the way up the, you know, the lower Cape. I mean, it's not, you're not really, you know, benefiting anything by doing it that way at the low temperatures, because you're using a lot of electricity. So the idea is to just do it smartly. When it's really cold out, you use your supplement, and in milder temperatures, you use a heat pump. And it's, you know, the other heat pump technology that's fantastic, by the way, is these heat pump water heaters. They're one of my, I know this isn't the topic, but
No, it is.
they're
That's
one of
fine.
the most, what I love about heat pump water heaters is for 5 months out of the year, you're cooling and dehumidifying your basement, and 100% of the energy that you're cooling and dehumidifying your basement with, you're heating your hot water. So it's like perfect. I take longer showers in the summer because I want my basement drier. You know, and it's as efficient as the dehumidifier that sits down there cranking away all summer. So that's another heat pump area that's absolutely one of the best ideas anyone's come up with.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yep.
I have a on-demand system
Mm-hmm.
is for hot water,
Mm-hmm.
which also works off of propane.
Yep.
It also is, you know, is the backup to the heat pump and the wood stove. And when I called someone to come in and asked about a heat pump hot water heater, they said, given what you already have in place, it makes no sense.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't agree. The one problem, so you have a combi unit, is that correct?
I don't-
It's a single unit for heating hot water and heat,
Yes,
and it doesn't have a tank, correct?
correct.
Okay, so the only issue with combis is there, because I did look into it, there is an issue on supplying preheated water to the combi. You almost have to bypass the combi to do it. Because what happens is that the burners in the combi are based on water flow. And if you're bringing heated water into a combi, it's gonna have nuisance lockouts. Because I tried to look into doing that exact thing, and what I ended up doing at my propane, I put actually a separate small wall hung boiler in with a small indirect. So it does the same thing that you're doing, but that way I preheat with my heat pump water heater. In the winter, I turn the heat pump water heater down to 100 because I don't want to, cool my basement too much in the winter. Although it's almost negligible, the difference. And then in the summer, I turn it up. So that way I'm supplying my small 20-gallon tank with always either preheated or fully heated water. In a combi, you just have to be a little careful because they have sensors and things, and they're made to bring cold water into, not preheated water. So you can do the same thing. I don't agree that it makes no sense because you're still paying, I don't know what you own your own tanks or do you lease them from the propane company?
I assume I lease them from the propane.
So I mean, you're probably paying $250 to $275 a gallon for propane, which is, and so a propane heater like that is about 90% efficient at making domestic hot water. A heat pump water heater is actually 335% efficient using electricity. And, yes, electricity costs more than propane, but not, if you take,
It's not a cost question. For me, it was an environmental question.
yeah, no, that's why, again, environmental problem, a question, it's 100%. I mean, do you run a dehumidifier in the summer for your
Not
basement?
really.
Many people have to because they have wet basements. So, so that's part of it. If you are running a dehumidifier, then it's a slam dunk. It's no question because you're replacing, again, it's like free hot water, and it's, environmentally, it's fantastic because
Right.
you're using electricity to dry your basement, and this does it for you and heats your hot water with the wasted energy. A dehumidifier, I don't know if you know how they work. They're just like an air conditioner,
Right.
except instead of the heat being discharged out the window or out a condenser, it's being discharged back into the basement. You actually take a compressor, you cool a coil, the cold coil, condenses moisture, but it cools the air. But then they put the heat right back into the air. So about 3/4 of the energy, or 2/3, is complete waste energy in a dehumidifier. So, but even if you weren't dehumidifying, again, it's an extremely efficient use of electricity because it's about 1/4 of the amount of energy with a heat pump water heater. And
Yeah.
they're very simple. They're just, yep. Yes,
Lily,
Lily, hi.
hi.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to digress so much.
No. I have a heat pump hot water heater and, it was great to hear you talk about it, actually. I wanted to ask, we have 3 times as many seasonal homes in our town as year-round homes.
What
And,
town?
If,
Wellfleet.
Wellfleet, is it?
Wellfleet, yeah. So,
Sorry,
I
I've
mean,
heard of
so the rationale for having people transition their heating systems over to an air source heat pump that heats and cools the house, and it's the primary source of energy. I'm thinking it may be a good idea if people are draining their houses in the wintertime and they have it set at a low temperature. Is that a good rationale to use their ductwork that's already there and just have that be the primary source? Or am I thinking incorrectly about that?
I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure. So if they were draining their house, most people who drain their house actually don't heat it. They turn it off. Some people do like shut off, maybe do a partial drain. In other words, they don't have someone come in and blow out the pipes. Because unfortunately, most of the houses now, you can't just open a drain and drain the house. You have to take air and blow it all out. And, you got to put antifreeze in the traps, etc. So we do have some people that either shut off the main or, do like a partial drain and then maintain a low temperature, like 45 or 50. You got to be a little careful how low you go because, of course, with our so at least in my home of Brewster, so dependable electric. I can't believe we lost power with that no wind storm the other day. You have to be careful if you maintain too low a temperature and you lose electricity, the house can freeze before the electricity comes back on, is one risk. But so, but yeah, so if someone were to want to heat with a heat pump without backup, it should be able to maintain like a 45-degree temperature in any home without supplement. That's for sure. Because typically, if the balance point is 70 degrees at say 20, that means it'll heat to 50 at 0.
So people shouldn't have a problem, if it's a partial drain, if they use an air source heat pump all winter long, is that what?
Yeah, no, that would be fine. Yeah, absolutely.
And then what if you lose power? I mean, how does that work? Because we, as you said, frequently do lose power. How does it work with something like that? I mean,
Well, just like any heating system, it will come back on automatically once power is restored. You don't have to reset anything. In fact, probably more reliable. Oil is notorious for under low power conditions, like what we call a brownout, locking out, because they have a transformer to ignite the oil. And if you get low power, sometimes it'll turn on, not enough power to ignite the oil. And after 45 seconds, an oil burner has a safety to shut off, and that has to be manually reset. So oil is probably the least reliable of any fuel. All the others, gas, propane, natural gas, they'll actually retry anytime, multiple times, anytime there's a loss of power, and they come on automatically. But,
and
But
then as a follow-up, so if somebody has, let's say, an oil furnace, which most of us in Wellfleet do, and you want to switch over to something like an air source heat pump, is there a unit that replaces that unit where there is the oil furnace right there in place? Or is it just a different, there's something outside and then it ties into the ductwork inside where it would tie into the oil furnace before?
So first of all, one of the things you have to be careful about when talking about this is whether you're talking about oil furnace or oil boiler. So there's two different appliances. So with any central ducted heat pump, we are talking 100% furnaces. Anybody that has a boiler, it's a completely different situation. There you would be looking at doing a Mitsubishi or a completely separate ducted system. Because the boiler, they really don't make, they do make them, but they're not really, air to water boilers. I mean, there's not right now a heat pump system. It's just not worth it because you can't air condition with your baseboard radiators. So anything with a boiler, you'd have to have some totally separate system. And the simplest and most efficient would be something like a Mitsubishi system. So with
you're talking about forced hot water as opposed to forced hot air.
Right. So I just want to be careful because a lot of people call boilers and furnaces the same thing. So with a furnace, a warm air ducted furnace, an oil furnace can be added onto, where you use even the blower, and you add in this heating cooling coil to the top of the furnace, and then that's piped to a heat pump. So you can use an existing oil furnace and still convert it to heat pump, and then you would have your backup in your furnace. And then what we do is we put in what's called the dual fuel thermostat. There's different types. Some are weather-based, where it's like an Ecobee, where it would, it has weather data through the internet sent to it, and you preset a balance point, and that would automatically switch from one fuel to the other. There's others that actually have an outdoor thermostat that measures the temperature. There's a third way where you put in a 2-stage thermostat. So the first stage would be heat pump, and then if the heat pump can't keep up, the oil burner comes on. But in those, you have to have a setup because you can't run the oil and the heat pump at the same time, because you can't put heated air into the coil while the refrigeration's trying to run. It'll cause a problem.
Did you call it a dual fuel furnace pump? Is that what you
A
said?
dual fuel. So dual fuel is just means you have 2 heats,
Okay.
2 heat, so you
If
either
it
have,
goes into the same unit, then it actually physically ties together in the same unit. the heat.
correct. It's very common. I've done a lot of dual fuel, mostly with propane. I mean, I have quoted oil systems, but I've done a lot of dual fuel. Because again, like I say, generally the heat pumps, need something to supplement them, and it just seems a little, kind of counterintuitive to use electricity when you're trying to, like I said, reduce the amount. When we can burn propane, I understand it's still a fossil fuel, but you can burn it at 96% efficiency. It's a little, better to do it that way than, and at least in my eyes, than to do it at 45% at the plant. Because I think that's the production efficiency of most gas to electric plants is 45 is considered good. And I don't know what they do with their supplemental heat. Yes. Someone was
GB,
waving.
you're on mute, GB.
Question I have is the analysis of the house and what works best seems to be a little bit more complex than with some of the other types of systems. So the question I have is, are the contractors prepared to do a really thorough, all parameter analysis, or is it better to go to some other resource to get the analysis done and then go to work with a contractor to get the the right equipment installed?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly people here at EF Winslow and myself are, I mean, that's what I've been doing for 30 something years, is calculating heat loads and cooling loads. And like I say, I when I do heat pumps, I actually create charts. I have cost of operation comparisons that I can give people that show. I actually have them for electric, for heat pump, for dual fuel. So you can actually see what your, consumption reduction is. So, that's the field we're in. That's what we do. Now, whether all contractors do it or not, it is additional work. You have to, like, typically when I, go to a home, I make a floor plan of the, am I on? I can't even see myself. Am I on camera?
No, your camera's off.
Oh, it is? I don't know. Oh, I didn't know that. Should have said so. I don't even know how to turn it on this computer. Not on mute. Where is it? Oh, I
It's
see. Oh, I'm
next to-
sorry.
There you are.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
So, like here's a home I just went to today, and, so I make a floor plan. I don't know if you can see it. And window sizes, I get insulation factors, and then using what we call manual J program, you do a room by room heat loss and heat gain. So I can have a scientific method for sizing the house, knowing what the heating requirements are, and then giving people that. So I mean, I'm sure there are engineers that should be able to do the same thing, but a professional heating and air conditioning company should be able to perform that.
So
Yeah.
Alex, when you talk about the balance point, what you're balancing is when it costs more to use the heat pump than it does to use the oil or propane.
Well, that's a good question. There's actually 2 balance points, or well, there could be more than 2. One would be that. So that's one thing that's a little more in depth. harder to calculate because you have to know the exact cost of the various fuels.
Yeah.
And they vary. That's the even harder part. It's not
So
constant.
what is your balance point?
At my house,
No.
oh,
Then when you were talking about balance point, what
well,
were you
there's,
talking
no,
about?
but that's one of them. And the other is the balance point where the heat pump cannot keep up with the heat loss of the house.
Okay.
Okay, in
All
other
right.
words, so let's say you have a heat loss of 40,000 BTUs at zero, just to pick a number.
Mhm.
And I put in a 3-ton heat pump. That's 36,000 BTUs of heat
Mhm.
capacity. Okay, well, that's 36,000 BTUs at 47 degrees out. Then they have their low temperature output. Well, that might be 24,000 BTUs. So you can actually chart, and they used to be able to give us like every 5-degree increments the output. I've had a hard time finding that from manufacturers now, but you can
Okay.
basically chart what the heat output is, and then you chart what the heat loss is and where they cross, where that point is the balance point. So that heat pump, I don't know, I'd have to chart it on a graph. I don't have one made up right handy.
I understand what you're saying.
So it's that the point where the heat pump is exactly the same output as the heat loss of the house. And then below that, it can't keep up. But there's also a second balance point, and that's where you might figure cost effectiveness. So there's a point where you can also calculate, they have a term called COP. COP is coefficient of performance, the acronym for that. And electric heat has a COP of 1. And then the COP of these mini split heat pumps varies according to outdoor temperature. So at 50 degrees, most of them are around 5. At 40, they're 4. At 30, they're like 3.2. At 20, they're 2.6. So using that efficiency at that level and the cost of electricity, now people that have solar might have a lower cost because they're using solar panels to produce their electricity. So, using whatever your cost factor is and the cost of whether other fuel you have, you can calculate what your balance point is.
Right. But for the lower one, where the house just can't keep up,
Mhm.
what are the typical temperatures that you've seen for a new house, for an older house, and so on?
So, I mean, one of the things we try not to do is put in massively oversized heat pumps, because the other thing we're trying to do here is air condition a house. Okay. As you know, Cape Cod has a very wet climate. Dehumidification is absolutely a factor of runtime. So when you put in, let's say you need 30,000 BTUs for cooling at 90 out. That's the heat
Yeah.
gain of your house, not heat
Right.
loss. We would put in a 2.5 ton or a 30,000 BTU air conditioner. Now, if you're doing a heat pump, the general rule of thumb is about 15% oversizing is acceptable. So we could put in a 3-ton in that home, and that would be within reasonable sizing for air conditioning, but that's then becomes the total capacity for heating. So we don't want to put in the wrong size, grossly oversized equipment just because it will heat lower, because then you're going to be wasting energy on the cooling end. You're going to actually shorten the life of the equipment, and you're going to do a poorer job. You're going to have to maintain lower temperatures to feel cool because it's going to be kind of clammy in the house. So, we're kind of stuck a little bit. Now, that also can be remedied with what they call variable speed equipment and also 2-stage equipment. So those are equipment that actually run at different sizes. But there's a lot to look into. Duct sizing is, dependent on the size of the equipment. So there's a lot of factors. You can't just throw a 5-ton in everybody's house. Tonnage
Is that the same as variable flow refrigerant? Variable speed is variable flow?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Yeah, variable refrigerant flow, variable speed.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
you know, I mean, there's a lot of names thrown around that I don't know. I think, you know, some of it is based on the manufacturer. In the mini splits, they call them inverter technology.
Mhm. Okay.
It's very complex. It's hard to give you very simple answers without
I'll
making
ask a
a
very simple
course
question. Is your last name M-A-C or M-C?
MC.
Okay.
Once upon a time, my family's name was MAC, but they moved to Boston and changed it to fit in with the Irish. 'Cause it's a Scottish name.
I wanted to spell it right when we do the minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So could you say a little bit about ground source heat pumps? Are people using them in residences at all?
Yes. So ground source heat pumps are, because you have a constant temperature. Groundwater is 52 degrees constantly.
Mhm.
Now, there are, not to make it more confusing, there are different types of ground source. There's open and closed loop.
Let's talk about closed loop.
Okay, so closed loop, the nice thing about closed loop is you're able to maintain your water quality and not have to worry about contamination. I've seen
Right.
systems destroyed by like rust bacteria, things like that. A closed loop uses, you know, water or antifreeze. Usually it's actually an antifreeze through trenches. They make two different kinds of closed loop, but to keep it simple, it goes through a trench around the yard so that there's enough ground to absorb the cooling that's produced in the winter and then the heating in the summer. The one little bit of a problem with closed loop is you can get into, because we have an imbalance, we use more heating than cooling.
Mhm.
Closed loop in our area, little by slow, degrades in efficiency because you get into almost a permafrost condition. In other words, the ground gets colder and colder and colder till it actually can freeze. And then in the summer, then summer comes, now you're getting super fantastic efficiency because of course you're drawing from very cold ground that's surrounding the pipe. But there's not as much summer warming as there is winter cooling of the ground. So
What about vertical loops, which go down? Do people
yeah,
use those?
that's more like a geothermal,
Right.
they call it. So
And
that's
that
using,
won't freeze up, will it?
no, so that technology uses the heat of, deep ground levels to heat your piping, correct. I don't do a lot of work with that myself, so, my knowledge there isn't as
Yeah.
familiar as it is with the
In
air to
this
air.
climate, not in this climate, on Cape Cod, you don't hit ground. You just keep going through sandbar, wet
Yeah.
sand.
Yeah.
So it's not expensive to drill because it's just wet sand.
Yeah, well, I understand, but it still is an expense. And again, I'm not familiar with the pricing on that, but no, those are the most efficient systems. And I mean, you can also use, you guys all have wells, or most of you do. I don't know, is there town water anywhere in Wellfleet?
Only downtown. We all have
Okay,
wells.
the nice thing about when you have a well is then you only need a discharge well. And you can use groundwater to actually heat and cool your house, which is a constant 52 degrees instead of outdoor. So that efficiency of those does not change. Stays the same efficiency year round.
But you're saying if you use groundwater, it's an open system, not a
It's
closed.
an open system, correct.
And are there any issue? Is that something that's
In most cases, there's no issues. you filter the water. Like I said, I have seen some, like in Dennis, there was one, what it was is they were getting water from the dump, their landfill. So they got rust bacteria in their water. In most cases, it's not really an issue. But it's an open system. It uses supply well and discharge well. And their COPs are up in the 5 constantly, year round.
Yeah, but wouldn't you be drilling down into the saltwater layer? So you'd be dealing with salt water rather than fresh
You don't,
water.
no, you just drill, no, so you have a normal well, you take a normal well, it's no deeper. It's not a deep well, it's just a normal well, like, again, I'm not a well expert, so, you want to get some input from someone on wells. I'm not the guy to ask. But basically what you do is, I forget the separation distance, but you have to keep the discharge well separated from the supply well. So you're not using any water because the water's going back into the ground. It's just they have to be separated far enough apart so you don't get the cold water being pulled back in to your warm water. You follow?
Yeah, or you could put the cold water downstream from, since there's a flow. But yeah, I understand.
So it's not wasting water. You're taking the water out and putting it back.
Do you know anybody who does that on the Cape? That we might talk to?
You mean the well work or the groundwater?
The groundwater,
I'm
the
pretty sure
systems.
I haven't done one here with EF Winslow. I can talk to them about it. I'm not sure, to be honest, how much we do with that. I don't know the names of guys. I'm sure they're around. And, the well people, yet it's separate company to do the wells than who does the HVAC work.
And why did you go automatically to an open system instead of a closed one when it's vertical? Is there a reason for that?
When it's vertical, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you did a vertical well, because vertical wells take much less land area.
Well, there's 2 types. A vertical well goes much deeper.
Right.
Right.
But why
Yeah.
wouldn't it be closed as well?
It would be.
Oh, okay.
Saying there's 2 types. You can do it with open. So for
Okay.
instance, in the case of many of you people who have wells,
Mhm.
it would probably be more cost effective to do a discharge well than do a vertical closed loop.
I see. How much water does it take, actually? Maybe
I think some of them typically use anywhere from, I think the range would probably be in anywhere from 5 to 12 gallons per minute.
okay. And what would a typical house well be able to draw normally? There'd have to be a much bigger well, wouldn't it?
Typically, if I remember correctly, we used 4-inch wells.
Well, okay, so 5 to 12 gallons per minute. What does my water system, my fresh water system draw? How many gallons a minute?
Well, if you're taking a shower, it's, what is it, 2 or 3 gallons per minute?
I see.
So
So you
3
say,
or 4 showers would be,
so it's
3
like
showers
running
would be
3 or
like-
4 showers all the time.
if you had 3 or 4 running at once, you'd use about 6.
And so,
Again, wells aren't my expertise, so I don't want to, tell you something that I don't know.
I have a question, Alex. For a typical house, and nothing's typical, of course, is it typically more expensive to do the mini splits than to do something that ties into the ductwork, or does it depend on the situation?
Mini splits are very cost effective. So, a ducted, I mean, you can spend, you can easily, I did a system recently up in Wellfleet that was a combination of mini splits and ducted. It was, $70,000 for 3 systems. So But that, they had no ductwork there, so that, I guess that's not a fair comparison. But I mean, you can easily spend, $10,000 to $20,000 on an install with an existing duct system on Central, depending on what products you use. There's different efficiencies and different features. Mini splits, average probably 4,000 to 5,000 per unit, per single head. Again, every job's a little different, but so it's hard to say one's more or less, depends on how intricate and how involved you get. But central systems are, they're not cheap. They're a lot of work. You have sheet metal work, you have refrigeration work, there's a lot to it. The mini splits, it's mostly mount them on the wall and connect the refrigerant pipes. So they tend to be a little simpler install, probably heavier on equipment cost.
What's the solution with separate bedrooms? I mean, do you have to have a unit inside each one of the
You're
bedrooms?
gonna close the doors. You gotta have one in each bedroom.
How about putting air vents above the sills, the door sill, a fan?
Well, I've seen some products, they make these, so I was involved in some, like a, it was like a condominium or something, and they make these transfer fans.
Yeah,
But remember, no matter what you do, the room that the unit's in becomes your plenum. So the room that the unit's in is always going to be colder than any other room, whether it be open doorway, transfer fan, because in order to cool air to get from the room that the unit's in to the other room, it has to be colder.
you're talking air conditioning when you say
So
cold,
yeah,
not heat.
right, cold or hotter. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
So it's not, the only perfect system is with a unit in each room or ducted. And then they do make some, they do make a mini split that, so I've done like a hybrid system where, say you have like a second floor bedroom area and then a big open floor plan, maybe you have a master bedroom, big open area, and then upstairs you have maybe 3 bedrooms. So they make a hybrid where you can put like a wall unit in the master bedroom, a wall unit in the main house, and then you have a small ducted system for the upstairs, with an air handler in the attic. So and one heat pump to heat it. So you can, do things like that where it's sort of a hybrid. Every house has its own dictates and every individual. I mean, I meet people that, won't let me put anything on their wall. And then, I meet other people that are like, who cares? So, it's everybody's individual preference,
It's just very helpful. Thank you so much. I mean,
Sure.
a lot, and I so appreciate you sharing all this information with us.
Alex,
Okay, you're
thank you
welcome.
very much.
Sure.
And please,
We're thinking after COVID to running public information sessions where
Uh-huh.
we just want to tell people about mini splits. Typically, we had audiences of 30 or 40 people.
Right.
Is that something that you would see doing? Because you get a lot of business out of it.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're going to try to run those. Maybe it'll be next fall. By the time it'll be safe to have crowds again.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
But we're thinking of doing that. We did it about 2 years ago.
Better do it early fall before everybody heads to Florida.
Well, but there are lots of residents who
I know,
stay
just
here
being
year
funny.
round. Yeah,
Trying anyways.
yeah.
Um,
Actually, when we run them for 6 or 8 months, once a month.
Yeah, okay.
And we're going to cover Orleans to Provincetown the next time around.
Okay.
So we'll be going to
Yeah,
every other week. We'll go to the next town and so on.
sure. All right.
Right. Well, good.
right.
We'll get in touch with you.
All right, well, thank you. Good luck.
Okay.
Get a hold of me if you need any questions answered anytime.
We
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you
Welcome.
very much.
All right, good luck.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye. I gotta figure out how to, oh, there we go.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. That was very useful. We all interpret things in terms of our own house. It sounds like conservation is still number one because you get the best bang for the buck. And then these things work very well, right? I know that the systems they sell now, they claim run to 20 degrees below zero. But that means that they're just putting out some heat. And what Alex pointed out is you have to back off to figure out how much heat you need for your whole house, because it can't be 20 degrees below zero is where it's barely putting out some heat. Maybe it's rated at 50% at 20 degrees below zero, but you have to back off that to see what it takes to heat your house, which means you really, maybe it doesn't work below zero or even 10 degrees.
Yeah, it sounded to me, Dick, that
Yeah.
they have to size it for both air conditioning and heating, and that they don't want to oversize it because it's going to be too much humidity in the summer with the air
No,
conditioning.
too much air conditioning. If you size it for heating, you have over air conditioned.
Right. So, I
Which-
mean, so it sounds like that, there's an art as well as a science involved with this. And
Right.
that it was really helpful. So when people
Right.
ask me about it, I certainly can.
So the humidity is different.
And
If you're over air conditioning, you're drying out the air too much. It becomes too dry. Some
Okay.
people think that's bad and some don't.
I
Okay.
think what part of this says is that some parts of that technology are, where they need to be in terms of, efficiency and being able to do the heating and cooling that's needed. It sounds to me like these systems need to be more generally computerized to measure more parameters so that, things like humidity and, other factors, so that you don't have to worry about this. If you, oversize the air conditioning, or if you oversize the heating, you're going to affect the air conditioning and so forth, so that they can, control themselves better and not have to worry about these things. My guess is that that's probably what's, happening in the development areas of the companies that make these types of equipment, but it hasn't quite reached the market in a way that eliminates some of these art and science calculations to come up with what they need.
Well, what it says is that when you over air condition, you get very dry air, meaning the humidity goes down to 60%. And it feels substantially different than what it is outside. On the other hand, right now, my humidity is 28% because it's so dry out. So you can live with a wide range of humidities and not feel like anything is that bad. John, yeah.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for us is that we live on Cape Cod,
Right.
not in general experiencing the extreme cold,
Right.
or for that matter, the extreme heat that would be typical for the mainland New England. Worcester is a whole different situation. I think from what I'm taking away from this is that we're situated in a way that these heat pumps make a lot of sense for us especially since many of us have solar units on our homes anyway. I think this is something that as an energy committee, we should very seriously think about
Right.
publicizing, because again, I think we'd have a different calculation if we lived in Worcester, but we don't live in Worcester. We
Yeah,
live,
well, we did publicize it. The last time we did an out of Cape
no, I know that.
Solarize,
I know. In fact,
you know,
Dick,
we
you're the one
pushed
who
it. Yeah,
turned me on to these things.
yeah.
I'm just
Especially
saying,
when electricity is free. I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
I'm not paying anything for electricity.
The last time I think we really publicized the hot air, the heat pumps for the heating hot water. That was our main focus. So, I mean, it would be great to be able to expand to heating and cooling and have that kind of expertise and knowledge as well.
We talked about mini splits a lot. In fact, mostly mini splits, not hot water heaters. I kept forgetting about them, but they do pay. And
Go on to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion and review of grant proposal status.
yeah, how's our grant situation? Anything happening?
Yes, there's been a couple of developments, and so today I'll talk about two things. They're municipal vulnerability preparedness related. And the first one is that the grant that was submitted, the proposal that was submitted through the Cape Cod Commission that was turned down in the fall is about to be resubmitted. I heard from Heather McElroy, and that's where we're partnering with various towns on the Cape. It's a regional grant, and it would be a feasibility study for two selected low-lying road areas to come up
Per
with.
town? Two per town or two?
Two per town, I
Okay.
believe. Yeah. And then the other thing, which is also MVP related, is that Carol and I attended 3 webinars that were prepared by the,
4.
there were 4.
Carol.
Well, yeah, there were 4. You're right. Absolutely. The last one today. Oh, so you know about those. Okay, so I don't really.
No. She knows about them. We just saw her holding up 4 fingers.
Oh, who was that, Carol?
Yeah.
Carol said, I didn't see that. Okay. But yeah, so basically they, the 3 of them, the first one was for, okay, so all 3 of them were showcasing successful projects that they have funded in the past. And the idea was to give all of us new ideas of what they're looking for and how communities work to get their ideas off the ground and get the funding. So the first one was based on the nature-based mission or objective that they seek. You know, that's something that they really look at. And so they had a couple of project coordinators, I guess you could say, who presented their projects. And one of them was Braintree, just to give you an example of what sort of projects these are. Braintree did a removal of industrial dams in their river that runs through it, and they're doing replanting of natural native plants and such. And part of the objective is to create better wetlands, healthier wetlands, increase the herring migration, things like that. So that was one plan, just to give you an idea on that. And then the next webinar was for social justice and equity, and an explanation of what that is. And I have to say, really exciting things are going on in the state with these projects. I think Carol will agree that it was really interesting to listen in on what they're doing. So for that, it largely involved working with vulnerable populations, low income, where they're more prone in some sense to climate related crises, and turning certain areas into greener, parklands and such. They're called heat. There's something called heat spots, which just attract a quicker climate change warming. So I don't know all the science details, but that gives you an
Heat
idea.
islands?
What was it?
Heat islands?
No, heat spots.
Okay.
Heat areas, and so they just attract because of the nature of what's been built there, and probably very much so industrial and urban areas. They attract more heat and heat up quicker, and it makes residents in that area particularly vulnerable. So they're engaging the public with working on that. And so there were quite a few going on in Cambridge and in Boston, in the city area. One takeaway from that was that I know that Wellfleet is not really designated social justice because we don't have, I guess, the low income or people of color, minority groups, or whatever. But a definition of climate vulnerable that fits into this social justice definition is age, of course, but people who are living on their own could be very vulnerable in a
Lost your sound.
Yeah, lost you.
No. Speak closer to the microphone, maybe.
Am I back?
You're
Yes.
back.
Okay, I'm back. All right. Yeah, I should have given a heads up about that. So did you hear me leave off of if you're a property owner?
No. You said people who are living alone.
Okay, so people who are living alone are very prone to storms, flooding, etc., catastrophic situation. So that's considered climate vulnerable. And then lastly, property owners, because their property could be subject to a lot of damage. So those are included. So that expanded the definition. And, I want to look more into that and understand it better, but they did clarify that. And then finally, they had a webinar on partnerships and what that means. And they, like every other grant maker, really emphasize that. They really, the thing now is to partner with other towns, intra-town with different committees and departments and such, NGOs in your town, organizations. And so there was that. And the biggest takeaway with that, all of that, so they were giving advice on, how to make this work for you. And the biggest takeaway that, and I'd like to hear what Carol says, is to break seemingly overwhelming, huge projects down into smaller, workable projects and get your partners lined up. So, but the webinars were really great, not just for applying to MVP. It was great advice for applying for any grant anywhere. So that's where we're at with that.
Good. Did you want to add anything, Carol?
Your mic is muted.
You'll have to unmute before you add anything.
Just press your.
I don't have anything to add. Suzanne did a great job. The last presentation that we saw was a town of like a comparable size to ours, and they've done wonderful work with zoning and regulations. And I want to pass that information on to David once it gets on their website, because I think that might be really helpful. But I think for me, one of the big takeaways was that we really do need to get our ducks in a row in forming alliances. And that's why I asked Dick if we could look again at our committee liaisons and make sure that we have liaisons for all the committees that we really should have liaisons for. Because I think like the Conservation Commission, I mean, do we have anybody on that?
John is on the Conservation
Oh, he
Commission,
is? Okay, good, good. Because,
and David's on the Planning Board.
right, and that's obviously key. Um,
I'm on wastewater as well.
Yes, and that was very useful what you brought up last time about the bulkheads. You know, I hope we can incorporate that into something.
Can someone remind me what I was supposed to be liaison to, because I never followed up on it, but I certainly would be glad to now.
I'm not sure. Do you have any idea, Lily? No? Okay.
Off the top of my head.
Is there a building committee?
It might have been the building committee.
I will try to consult on the notes from our earlier meeting and see. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, and then one last thing related to this is based on following up with what Carol said about having better liaisons. I did reach out to the Truro Energy, Climate Action Committee, and letting them know that we were all talking about in our committee here about just better partnership and working together towards climate change. So I reached out to them again, and she was very interested. I presented it as something, an Outer Cape Alliance with climate action committees. She was very interested, and she forwarded it to Bob Higgins Steele. And so he thought that he liked the idea and thinks we should go for it. And I brought it up strictly in the vein of getting, doing projects that can be funded. But he saw it fitting in with what David is trying to accomplish with the Outer Cape Energy Alliance work. So just wanted to add that.
Dick?
Yeah.
I've got to go in a minute, so I wanted to talk about this briefly, and it's about the reaching out to other committees.
Yep.
I think an important committee, and I'll talk about it in a minute, but that we need to reach out to is the Bike and Walkway Committee. Because we're talking about reducing carbon, getting people out of their cars and onto sidewalks and onto bikes is an important thing to talk about. Having said that, I was on the Bike and Walkway Committee for several years, and I left out of frustration, because every year we sent to the town our suggestions about where they should add bike lanes in the town, and it went nowhere. And then B, there was the issue of the cross Cape bike lane that's all tied up with the extension of the bike path.
So the Bike and Walkways Committee is currently focused on
Stopping the bike path.
The rail trail extension.
Right, they're trying to stop.
Someone at their last, they did have a public forum yesterday.
Right.
One person brought up the fact that, remember, people use bikes for transportation. It was confined to Route 6. And I don't think they're focused on anything but the bigger issue, and won't be for another 6 months or a year.
Right. I mean, that's true. And that's the reason I left it was frustration. And also I support the extension of the bike path, and they opposed it. But I think someone else should go on that committee and try to help move them towards a vision of Wellfleet that involves people not driving everywhere. That is
Okay.
a safe way.
Well, I've been attending all of their meetings for various reasons, mostly because when they got formed, they kept talking about the Cape Cod Commission would do this and do that and do the next thing. So I got started putting them in touch with Steve Tupper at the Cape Cod Commission. And I've been at all their meetings. I guess I could do that unless you want to volunteer.
No, I'm saying my frustration level was so high, I don't ever want to
Yeah.
touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
And they don't want me on it because, you know, I get angry.
Okay.
But
Okay. Well,
having you on it is a
I've been
good
going
idea.
to their meetings.
And I think pushing them to start thinking about, for example, bike lanes from town center to the beaches, bike lanes within the town is an important focus. Getting the town to spend money is a different issue, but at least I think it would be nice if they could focus themselves that way, because I think we have too many cars. We have a parking committee that never even addressed the possibility of bikes as an alternative way to get to beaches instead of extending parking lots. I just think there's a lot that can be done that is directly linked to our committee's interest.
Mhm. Okay.
Keep going, Dick.
Okay. All right. Anything else? The discussion of fuel efficient automobile policy for the town. Did Ryan leave? No, Ryan Curley's here. Ryan, can we call on you? Or are you not listening?
He's muted.
I know.
Here, I was just vacuuming actually. So yeah, the town adopted it. And I don't know, what else do you want to know about it?
It adopted it, and it's electric cars as soon as possible, right?
Not specifically. So the way it's worded is kind of to have a preference towards plug-in hybrids as currently written, or other zero emission vehicles, which includes all electric vehicles or, other ZEVs. And yeah, that would apply to the town departments. And basically it's because there's a much wider range of possible vehicles that are out there now. I mean, this year, for example, this current model year, for the Ford F-150, they have a hybrid version of it now. And they're expected to introduce an all-electric model of the F-150 next year. I don't know, some of the departments were hesitant over potential cost differences between a hybrid or an all-electric versus a standard internal combustion powered vehicle.
They need cyber trucks.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think, I mean, especially for emergency response vehicles, you can't rely on all electric currently, because they have to be available for times when we're out of power. Eventually, we'll probably be getting there. I just don't think we're, in terms of emergency response vehicles specifically, are capable of doing all electric. And we also know that the charging times are getting better as well, which affects availability of the vehicles as well. The police department, for example, probably wouldn't be very happy if they had to, bring their vehicle back and have a vehicle down while it was charging for a considerable amount of time between shifts.
Well, wait, the vehicle chart, we don't run any vehicles 3 shifts a day. So a 6-hour charge overnight means you can go 350 miles in a day. We don't run our vehicles 350 miles every day.
It varies. I mean, for emergency vehicles, you also have the communication loads for the electrical consumption. You have the antennas, the computers, plus, I don't know, police always seems to want to leave their vehicles on, so either for cooling or for heating. So they're running all day when they're up. It wouldn't be like, I'm not saying that it's impractical. I'm just saying that it's something to keep in mind, and that we do have events where, or possible events where you would be wanting to use emergency vehicles for a considerable amount of time back to back. And we have to keep that in mind as well. But yeah, the policy does push the town further along. I'm not sure if any other town on the Cape or even in Massachusetts has a similar policy at this point, because it grew out of the green communities designation, and then I kind of updated it to apply what is current now. And the state hasn't updated their list of vehicles since 2018 as to what's applicable under their criteria. And some of those vehicles obviously aren't being built anymore. And there's quite a few more models out there than there were in 2018.
So the federal government announced that they're going to replace all their vehicles with electric vehicles.
Yes.
That's a 675,000 car buy over the next 5 years. That's got to drive, and they have a lot of police car types of vehicles. It's got to drive that market into existence. Yeah, Julie. You have to unmute.
I was trying to use my space bar to unmute, and for some reason it didn't want to work. One of the things, that I thought about after our last meeting was the issue of charging stations being connected to backup generators or emergency generators. And what thought is being given to that, and what thought is being given to as more electric vehicles come online. What does that do to the capacity of backup generators? So we know some places like police and fire, obviously I assume have backup generators, but if they go to at some point all electric vehicles, what effect will that have on the capacity of those generators? And places like DPW, if they go to more electric vehicles or town vehicles, if they go to more electric vehicles, do the charging stations they use connect to backup generators so that when the power's out, they have capacity? And another thing to this point about extended use, when there's when there's a fire or there's a serious accident or whatever, the emergency vehicles there are obviously running for an extended period of time. I don't think it's that big a deal on the Cape, but I know up in the Boston metro area, sometimes they have to bring a fuel truck to a large fire just to keep the pumpers and the ladders refueled. I don't know, maybe somebody's got to give some thought to a mobile charging station. Just something to think about. One more thing to think about.
Mhm.
Yeah, and one of the things from my perspective is having more than one available fuel source also increases the resiliency of your response. So you're not reliant on continuous gasoline shipments necessarily. You could have, for instance, the fire department has a solar array on the rooftop, and you could potentially use that to partially fuel your fleet. You know, it's all this, we're in this, you know, the in-between time of a transition. So.
Okay. The other thing to think about is batteries as a backup. Although a Tesla Powerwall is about 14 kilowatts and the full charge on a Model Y is 75, so you'd have to have about 5 of them. I guess that's pretty expensive. A generator's cheaper.
Yeah, Eversource is building a backup battery facility in Provincetown, or has already built it. I think that's already built. So they have a backup battery facility. It looks basically like something that you'd see as a self-storage facility. So that's all it looks like from the outside. The other thing I would say is that there are also hybrid vehicles that are for heavy equipment. So you have like hybrid front end loaders now and that sort of stuff. You know, if somebody wants to put in the effort as to try and write a reasonable policy that could apply to the heavy equipment of the town, you know, that is something that we could also consider as a town. I just don't have, I don't know how to even word it because there's not really a good model out there currently that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Okay. I think when it becomes economically within the realm of possibility, it'll become more obvious. I don't think it's possible right now. But who knows? School buses are the next obvious target, electric school buses. And they're probably 3 or 4 years out, I would think. Because how many school buses do we own / lease? Probably about 6, right? To cover the town?
The town doesn't own those directly.
Well, right, but how many school buses are we leasing in effect for the town between the high school and the middle school and the elementary school?
I'm not really sure, but again, that's a regional issue. But the policy as it is written does apply to the Wellfleet Elementary School, but I don't think it would extend to the school buses, just because you know that. I mean, what's the name of the contractor that they use? Is it First Student or? I don't know. It's the school buses are kind of weird. It's no longer where they're owned by the districts. They're owned by an independent contractor, and then even though they would be a great opportunities to.
Right, and you just changed the term of the contract. Must be electric.
Wouldn't school buses be a good, you know, sort of Barnstable County type of thing to look at, you know, countywide?
I don't know. When it becomes economically feasible, I think we will get there. I think it's about 3 years away before it's feasible.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of you know, volume purchasing power.
Well, then we lease them because we let a private company buy them.
Right, but if you know, Wellfleet goes to the company and says, we want the buses that transport students here to be electric, it just seems to me it would make much more sense to do it countywide.
So the MBTA has been doing pilots with all electric vehicles, or a couple all electric buses. And what they're finding is that their range is about 40 to 50% less in the winter than it is during the summer. And it's the impact of the cold weather on batteries primarily is what's driving that. I think they just extended the pilot to a longer period, but there are, definitely some challenges in terms of how a bus fleet is used. Well, for their instance, where they're using, their buses all day, and how do they turn them around within a reasonable amount of time, fully charged? But yeah, if let's say we went to all electric buses, you would probably be range limited. So some of the off Cape trips might become an issue.
Well, I know that Martha's Vineyard has their fleet all electric right now, and they're more rural the way we are, long distances in small towns. But their fleet is completely electric today. So they manage somehow.
Yeah, it's something to look into.
I wanted to ask also, Brian, has the select board discussed giving the various departments some support if the vehicles are twice as expensive? Is there any discussion about that? To help
So,
them out?
well, for vehicle purchases, a lot of times they have to go before town meeting. So like, the police cruiser replacements, those have to go before town meeting. So, it would be presented to the public as, this is how much it costs. And this, I think they've been pretty clear that they're supportive of the town moving in this direction. But ultimately, it's the town's taxpayers and residents that will decide.
But the cost is not, the cost is at most $10,000 more and probably is even.
It
with
But
varies.
budgets, each department has a budget. And I mean, sometimes doubling that budget, they would have to, doubling the cost of a vehicle would impact on their budgets. Is there any compensation you're talking about to
So
help departments?
all those vehicle purchases have to go before town meeting usually for a Proposition 2.5 override. That's how the majority of Wellfleet's vehicles are purchased, from front end loaders to police cruisers to recreational or rec vans and that kind of stuff. It's not a line. I mean, yes, in their budget, there's a line item, but it's not like, that's considered a capital cost. So it has to go before town meeting for approval. It's not like, they have X number of dollars to spend on a new vehicle each year. So, and the other, there's a couple benefits from a lot of these vehicles. One is usually they're lower maintenance because they have fewer moving parts. And two is the fuel usage will go down. So that basically, creates some degree of cost savings. I don't know where the break-even point is, but there is a break-even point out there. And it is something to consider. I know that some of the departments are also concerned that they're going to have a hard time finding people to service these vehicles locally. So that is one of their concerns as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, anything more that we want to talk about on this? Let's see. I thought I had
What
the
about,
agenda up.
you had the discussion of the new Nauset Regional High School building after? the-
Yes. I have not yet sent out the letter. I have it drafted. I think I sent it right out to the group
Yeah.
before, but I'm going to
Right.
send a letter to the school committee on behalf of our committee, as we voted to do last time. And then I'm going to slightly redraft it and get on the agenda for the next select board meeting, asking the select board to request the regional school building committee to go with an all-electric school. The reason is it's getting close to a vote, and I think it's something we need to do. I just think that we have to come out and say we would prefer strongly that they send out only, that they go with an all-electric building. They did a study and they said that an air source heat pump, a variable refrigerant pump, would be in the same cost range as the building they're planning. Might be $600,000 more on a $139 million building. And that's $600,000, if it were real, would have to be paid for by the 4 towns in question over the course of 40 years. On the other hand, operating costs would be lower. We could get a grant for at least $300,000 from the Cape Light Compact, so now it's going up by only $300,000. And they did not actually correctly study ground source heat pumps. I think I mentioned this to the committee before. They had a consultant who came in and said, the specific heat of sand is 0.25 something or other, worse than clay, and therefore you'll need 5 acres of vertical tubes. She was wrong. It's 10 times that amount, 2.5 to 4, because it's wet sand, meaning they'd only need half an acre of vertical tubes. So aside from the lower cost of doing 10% of the tubes, and therefore 10% of the electricity, and therefore not needing to extend the electrical system by as much as they planned, it's just they haven't, the cost could even be lower for a ground source heat pump than for the methane system they're currently planning. Because the current system that they're planning is natural gas, which we should refer to as its real name, methane. And methane is even worse than coal as a greenhouse gas. That is, methane is 80 times worse in causing a greenhouse effect than carbon dioxide. And even though there's less carbon dioxide emitted by methane after it's burned, methane itself leaks between the time you frack it till the time it gets to the end user. And the industry average is that 8% of the methane that they pull out of the ground leaks into the atmosphere before it gets to the end user. And something that's 80 times worse, even if you're only releasing 8% of it, you are 2 or 3 times worse than coal in the greenhouse effect of using natural gas or methane than you are if you're using coal, say. And we all know coal is a terrible pollutant. Okay, but natural gas is not better. It's several times worse than coal. So we've got to get away from natural gas and stop thinking of it as a reasonably good alternative to coal or fuel oil. It's much worse because of all the methane that leaks to the atmosphere. the amount of methane that leaks to the atmosphere, 8% is the industry average. I don't know what it currently is on Cape Cod, but I do know that 4 years ago, National Grid was leaking 25% of all the natural gas they put into their pipes before it got to the end users. And they were ordered to shut down, and they fixed the worst offending pumps. But we don't know what their current loss is, except that it's no longer as bad as 25% of all natural gas leaks into the atmosphere, which means 25% of all methane leaks into the atmosphere. Maybe they're down to the national average now. Yeah, yes, Carol, you're on mute. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is everyone aware of the series of, I think it's 8 meetings on Wednesday nights leading up to the vote that are run by the school committee?
Yeah, there are 2 meetings left. Yeah, 2 more left on Wednesday night. I
No,
think
there are like 6 more left. It's the end of March when we vote.
I thought, well, they had announced originally 6 meetings. I didn't know if they were extending it.
I think there've only been 2, but they take questions and answers, and
Yeah, I did send the link out to everybody for the announcement, which has the URL on the committee.
Okay.
But yeah, I haven't gone yet. I had a conflict last week.
The discussion on this, unfortunately, seems to have bypassed the energy problem, and they're talking about the school choice almost exclusively. But
yeah,
I think if we ask questions, that we could raise that again.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I should. I've been intending to go. I missed last week's because I had a conflict, but I will go this week. GP, you're on mute.
Dick, I've got to roll off here in about 2 minutes, but can I call you tomorrow about where things stand with regard to the information on the Eversource bills?
Sure.
Can you give us a quick update, GB, before you leave?
Say that again.
Is there an update you want to give us?
Oh, well, real quick, I was able to get 2 years worth of bills for the elementary school. And I'm waiting for 2 years worth of bills for all of the Eversource bills that the DPW handles.
Mm-hmm.
So once I get all of those, I put the elementary bills in a spreadsheet, so I've got that all set up and so forth. Now I can just use that as a template for the Eversource bills for the DPW.
So GB, let me ask you to put together your best estimate right now, because there's a good chance we could be online before our next meeting.
Okay.
It's not guaranteed. It's not even 50-50, but there's a sizable chance we could be online.
Okay. Well, I've got.
Take your best shot at it. If we're wrong, we'll fix it in 6 months.
Yeah, I've got 1 month for all of the DPW bills, so I can use that as a template to start with. But having the elementary school now, makes it a more complete picture.
Good. So take your best shot at it and prepare the form. Send it off to Amoresco.
Okay. All right. I got to sign off. Night, everybody.
Okay. Suzanne?
Yes, I'm going to have to sign off real soon too, but I just wanted to ask, related to what we were talking about, the school building.
Yeah.
And so you're thinking of attending one and bringing up the methane?
Yes, but everyone else should do it as well, because they need to get a sense of.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if it would be a good idea when you do bring that up, or any one of us do, to notify the media, and maybe the Independent in particular, and maybe specifically Casey Meyer. She does a bit of investigative reporting, and let her know that that's an issue to come up, and invite her to attend as well. And maybe that's a story she would pick up, or
Yeah.
whoever reports it.
Right, there's another reporter that's doing the solar stuff though.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, I've talked to her. Okay, yeah, I should do that. If you go, we'll lose our quorum. So
Oh, okay.
what do we absolutely need to do now?
Lily, you're muted.
Thanks, Carol. Yeah, we should pick our date for our next meeting before you go. So,
Okay. Is Tuesday okay with everyone?
yeah,
Yeah. I'm
Okay. And this is the second Tuesday or the third? Third,
you know, next time,
yes?
if we could do the second next time, that would be better for me. We
Okay, and is it at 7?
I'd prefer it at 7, but
Okay, well,
I would,
I thought we decided on this time because of Carol.
I would prefer it at 4, but in fact, on the 9th, I have something I'd like to attend.
Oh,
so
I thought we usually met on the 1st, and that this was only because the first Monday, and we switched it because of the holiday.
oh, do we want to go to the first Monday? Which would be Tuesday the 2nd.
do you want to do Monday or Tuesday?
I don't care, whatever everyone else wants.
I can do the Monday, but it has to be at 7 o'clock. I can't do 4 o'clock on Mondays, but I can do 7 o'clock on Monday. And Tuesday the 2nd, I really can do either one. Anybody have a,
Dick is muted.
Dick, you're muted.
I didn't understand you. You can or cannot do the 2nd?
I can do the 2nd. I prefer 7 o'clock, but I can do 4 o'clock on March the 2nd.
which is a Tuesday. Is there a
Which-
reason why we're moving to Tuesday and not doing Monday?
No, we were avoiding Monday holidays. We
Okay,
got hit by several of them in a row.
okay.
I know David also prefers the 4 o'clock time. I mean, I'm willing to do it every other time, maybe.
Thanks, Carol.
So, 7 o'clock would be okay with me. I get off.
But
at
4 o'clock is ruled out for you, Lily? You can't make it, or?
On Monday, the 1st, no, cannot do that.
She could
Okay.
be Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah, right now, yes, that's fine. Up to you guys. I'm leaving it open to you guys.
Okay, I can do all of them. So it's Carol and David for 4 o'clock. Lily prefers 7, Suzanne?
I can do 4.
So March 2nd, Tuesday at 4 o'clock, do we agree on that?
Looks that way.
Okay,
Thank you. Next time we'll do 7, okay?
It will be sunnier by then.
Right. I'll be more awake.
Dick, did you say that the news on the PV before we leave, it might get connected? Is that the deal?
The select board approved the lease, but the town hasn't signed it yet. In the meantime, Eversource was asking, where's the lease? We'd like to get started. So Maria Broadbent is getting on the lawyer's back to get the thing signed and out. And so Eversource could start building within a few days. And it should only be a couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Thank you for all of your hard work on this.
Yeah, God. It's not that. It's all the hair I tore out. My blood pressure will go down. I'll stop dreaming of mailing pipe bombs to the planning board.
On this meeting that's being recorded. But I'll make a motion.
It's only a dream.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Needs to be a roll call. Suzanne,
Aye.
Dick, yes.
Lily?
Lily?
Aye.
And Carol, aye. Okay. There are a few of us left.
Thank you. Have a-
Okay.
I'm going to do a lot of NAs this on the agenda items. Take care. Have a good
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.